Well, first of all, I'd just like to apologize for the quality of some of my videos, like this one. I'm doing it on my webcam on my computer just because I usually use my phone, but sometimes when the lighting is real bad, it doesn't auto adjust very well. So I'm just going to use my webcam just sort of to get it done. Um, In this video, I sort of wanted to talk about the Four Noble Truths. I have been part of my daily routine, and I don't necessarily follow this routine perfectly, but what I try to do every day is, right now, I'm writing down the Four Noble Truths, and I wrote down the Four Noble Truths every day for like 2 weeks. And that way I kind of memorize them, and then I move on to a new thing. And right now I'm doing each of the Four Noble Truths individually with like details, like what are the details of the first truth, what are the details of the second truth. And it's just I've sort of been thinking about those definitions, about those truths, because of what I've been doing, and I sort of wanted to share a video about the Four Noble Truths. So for anybody that doesn't understand or doesn't have sort of a 101 in Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths are a summation of what Buddhism is really all about. Um, if somebody were to tell you 4 things about Buddhism so that you could understand it, they would tell you the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths, these are the Four Noble Truths, basically. There are lots of different ways that these are defined in Buddhism as a whole. The Buddha in scripture specifically said certain things about these Four Noble Truths. But the first truth, which is like, they call it the Four Noble Truths. They should call it like the Four Noble Facts, or because truths makes it sound like, I don't know, it's religion jargon. These are like facts of life that the Buddha taught. The first truth is that life is full of suffering. Life is suffering. And I'll get into that a little bit more. The second truth is, just shows you how versed in the truths I am. The second truth is the origin of suffering, where it comes from. The third truth is that you can escape suffering. I like to call it the liberation from suffering, because it isn't necessarily a death of suffering. Like, you can't get rid of suffering in your life. That's not what the third truth is. The third truth, for me at least, is a liberation from suffering. Not like it's in existence. It's your liberation from it. And the fourth truth is the path you need to take to to liberate yourself from suffering. So the truth that suffering exists, and it's life, and it's part of life. And the second is the origin, where suffering comes from. The third is the fact that you can liberate yourself from suffering. And the fourth truth is the path that you have to take, or you can take, to start liberating yourself from suffering. So, as a whole, Buddhism is about suffering, and that's one thing that I have liked a lot about Buddhism. I think that that's the center of our troubles with each other, with ourselves, with our cultures. I mean, it's all centered around suffering. Be it painful suffering, mental suffering. And I was just thinking early on today about those 4 truths. And basically, what I was thinking about the first one was that it's not saying that life is just suffering. I think people read that at first sight or at face value and don't really think about it, because it doesn't mean that life is just suffering. It means that life is attached to suffering. It is a part of life. Happiness is a part of life. But you can't have happiness without suffering. You can't have suffering without happiness. They coexist together. And it's just, you can almost, if you look at the first truth rightly, you can read it as life is happiness, because ultimately you want to be happy, and the rest of the truths are about how to ease and remove your suffering, liberate yourself from your suffering. So the first truth can be almost read as that life is happiness, but that it also has suffering in it. That's the problem. The second truth is the origin of suffering. And thinking about that one, where suffering comes from is from, there's two ways that it's put in Buddhism. One is attachment, and one is clinging. A lot of people read or interpret the second truth as your desires, or your passion. And that is just absolutely not true. For instance, I own my computer, and I like my computer, and I like to own my computer. I don't want somebody to just take off with it. There's an attachment there with my computer. It helps me do things. I'm able to do these vlogs because of it and things like that. But it's not wanting to have something or having a desire. It is clinging. Clinging is the most important part of understanding the truth of the origin, or the fact of life, about that suffering comes from somewhere, and it comes from clinging. And we all know this. I mean, this isn't a Buddhist thing necessarily, just a Buddhist thing. We have the saying, the most consistent thing in life is change, right? And so that's what the second truth addresses, is that if life is in a constant state of change, which is where impermanence comes into Buddhism, but we'll get to that maybe in a later post, I guess. If it's constantly changing, then why would you cling to something like you can have it forever? Like you can have it for any set of time. For instance, if my computer just gets stolen, I don't have a clinging to it. And actually, I say that with a grain of salt, because I think I actually would be pretty bummed if my computer was stolen. I would suffer a little. And that's just because I haven't personally mastered I have a bit of a cling. I cling to my computer a little bit. But generally, I think if it were stolen or taken, or I didn't have a computer for whatever reason, I couldn't find a job, I was poor, it just wasn't going to happen. It's a mental thing. You're able to let go of it. You're able to not be attached to it. You don't have to have it in your life. The Buddha talked a lot about not having likes and dislikes, and it's so funny because Buddhism is wrapped up in a vocabulary issue, because it doesn't mean it's like I have my Starbucks coffee here, and I like coffee. I drink coffee probably too much, and I like it. But that doesn't mean the kind of like that the Buddha was talking about. I don't have to have coffee. I can have tea. I can have just water. I can have Kool-Aid. If I can't have coffee, that's fine. And I know I have a lot of friends that probably would be like, yeah, right, hungry. But I don't prefer coffee. It's removing that preference that like says like if somebody offered you water and you had to drink water every morning for the rest of your life, you would be like, I need coffee. I have to have coffee. And so it's sort of it's not, I like coffee. People like to be happy. People like pleasure. They like to not suffer. I mean, it isn't about not liking things. It's about not preferring one thing over another. In fact, I would say that Buddhism, the practice of Buddhism, is about removing that kind of preference where you feel like you have to have even Buddhism in your life. You have to have a book. You have to have your religion. You have to have that you don't want to force yourself to have in your life because you're going to suffer when you don't have it. One day I may not have coffee, and if I chose to prefer only coffee, I'm going to suffer. You just have to be able to look at water or whatever else is offered up for you and see the goodness in it, and not prefer one thing or the other. So that's the second truth, where suffering comes from. The third truth is the truth of the cessation of it, or the truth of the liberation from suffering. And I always had a little bit of an issue with this third truth, especially at first phase, because it sounds like you can just not suffer. And I think that that's what turns people away from Buddhism, because it definitely kind of like, sort of, not turned me away from it, but I definitely was kind of, I don't know about that, Buddhism people. But after thinking about it, the third truth isn't about, and a lot of videos from Thick, I'll put some links in the description about who he is. He talks a lot about suffering, and the way he talks about it and the way I understand it is that it isn't removing suffering from life. You're going to experience things. You're going to live in life, and suffering is going to be there. It's like, saying you can remove the color blue from the world. You can't. It's there. Suffering, you can't remove it. It's going to be there. But since we understand that suffering comes from our clinging to things, to whatever, we know that we can liberate ourselves from suffering by not clinging. And it's just about the Buddha, in a lot of the books that I've read, says things like, be like the water. That whenever someone throws, like someone pees in it or something, or throws nasty stuff in it or something, it doesn't, grow this disgusting attitude and start to hate things and react negatively. It accepts the bad things and the good things. Its nature is to, it's not bothered by those things. And so, in order to not suffer, you have to learn to allow suffering to come into your life and not let it bother you. It is just a thing. It is like, somebody throwing, that's a kind of gross way to think about it, but throwing pollution into the water. The water doesn't develop a crazy personality or anything about it. And I understand this video is actually getting long, so I'm going to keep going. But you can liberate yourself from suffering by transforming suffering into something positive. That's the main point, I think, of the third noble truth, is that if you don't allow suffering to be suffering, what it is, and you turn it into something else, and maybe I'll do another video about about sort of how to do that, or how to think of that, or to approach it, you don't have to suffer when it, knocks on your door. Even pain. Sometimes, and this is going to be a little sort of whichever side is left, far left, sort of a concept to think about, is sometimes I do experience pain. Like, I'll have a backache or something, or a headache, and and just so you know, and I'm going to do a video on this too about meditation. People have this weird view of meditation. I had a weird view of it, but it's just mindfulness, and I'll get to that. But when I'm experiencing pain, I'll just sit down sometimes and I'll analyze the pain. I'll just let the pain happen, and I'll think about it, and I'll ask myself, what is pain? Like, it's just a feeling. It's just why am I reacting so negatively to it? And so sometimes the pain goes away. It doesn't fully go away, but I'm able to look at it differently, and it's not causing me sometimes I get headaches, and I'm just like, oh, like it's just like bothering me, and I'm like, and I really act like a big baby. Sometimes I have a headache or something going on, and I am mindful about it, and I'm actually able to be calm while it's happening, and it's just looking at it different, thinking about it different. And so it's about transforming suffering into something positive. You can even think of pain as, oh, I have a headache, especially if you're sitting down and being calm about it. You can think like, well, I don't have, something very painful happening to you. You could have your hand stuck in something that, is like hurting your hand a lot, and it kind of eases your perception of your pain. The fourth truth, which is the path to reaching that level. And there's many parts of that level. Like, I'm not at some mastery level where I can set myself on fire or not be bothered sometimes when, me and my girlfriend argue about something. I'm not at the full, like where the Buddha, I think, was near. I'm at a much lower level of the fourth truth, which is the path, and exercising that path in order to reach a liberation from suffering. And that path is, and this is part of the exercise that I've been doing, where I try to memorize the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, because I know what they are. They're in my head. I practice them a lot, actually, on a normal basis, just in everyday life, but I don't recall what it's called or anything like that. But this Eightfold Path, which is 8 parts to the fourth truth, which is the path, what you do to help relieve yourself from suffering, is techniques that you can use that will help you realize you're clinging to things. It will help you remove that. It will help you detach yourself from your clinging and suffering. And it's, let's see if I can remember it. Let's see, right view, which means having a correct view of the world. Like not having a bunch of superstitious stuff. You think that the number 13 is bad luck, or that, people just suck because they're mean, or you're a victim. You have to have a proper view of what's happening around you. And a lot of this stuff has to do with mindfulness, which is a very simple technique that is very hard to do. Right view, right mindfulness, which is being mindful of the things around you. And this is the biggest exercise, I think, in Buddhism, is being mindful. For instance, right now, I'm probably not being very mindful about what I'm doing. And people make fun of it a lot. They're like, when they're eating or something and they're like pretending about, like they're being mindful about eating, they're like, I am lifting the spoon. I am putting the spoon in my mouth. Like that necessarily isn't mindfulness. You can add that onto it and probably get some benefit out of it. But it's just, like I said, the mindfulness part is like where I was talking about having pain and then sitting down and analyzing your pain, finding where it's coming from, and not like it's coming from my brain. What is the feeling of pain? Why am I reacting so negatively to this? Why am I allowing myself to suffer because of, just a headache? Maybe you're overreacting and you're getting angry and pissy at everyone and everyone's like, you need to leave or something like that because you're overreacting. You're mindful about what's happening to you, about your sensations, about how you're acting. Some of the other parts of the Eightfold Path, which is 8 parts to the Fourth Noble Truth, is right speech, and that's mindfulness again. Thinking about what you say before you say it, not lying. That's typically what's under that. But just being mindful of what you're saying. Speaking in the right time, not speaking out of place, not cutting anybody down, not just reacting and saying, like thinking about things before you say something, right speech, right livelihood, which means putting yourself in a what you do in life. Like everybody sort of has a thing that they do in life. They're either a monk or they're a web developer or they're a vlogger. You sort of have this thing you do in life that you're contributing to the world. And that has to be a good thing. It has to be something that doesn't violate any of the other parts of the Eightfold Path, like lying. Like you could be in a certain kind of business where you might have to lie, and that would be ultimately bad for you. You could have bad speech. Your livelihood has to support your path. Right intent, and I'll go right into right action, right intent, right action. You of course have to have the right intent. You have to be mindful of what you intend to do and being clear and thinking about the effects you're going to have on people when you act. And then the right action. If you decide, like, you may feel like you really need to do something like rob a bank because your kids are starving and whatever, some crazy extreme situation that I come up with. And then even if you have thought about it and been mindful about it and you decided it's probably a bad thing to do, but you do it anyway, so you have to have right action and then right effort, which has to do with like your energy that you put into the things that you want to do. You have to have right effort. You can't be too excited or powerful or energetic about something, or it's kind of like, we say like we overdid it, or we half-assed it. You don't want to overdo something, and you don't want to half-ass something either. You want to have the right effort, and then that's achieved by having right concentration. And so that means, you can't be focusing on 10 million other things, and you can't be focusing just on one thing where you don't see what's happening around you. You have to be able to find a balance in there and have right concentration. And that's the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is the summation of the Fourth Noble Truth. And so I was just thinking about how I sort of got a grip on the information that's there, understanding what those 4 things really mean, because I've been writing them every day in the morning or at night, over and over and over, and thinking about what I'm writing and understanding what I'm saying, because before I could be like, the 4 Noble Truths, bam, 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 that's the 4, there you go. But I didn't understand what they were. Now I feel like I understand what they are, and right now I'm going over them again. I'm going through suffering, and I'm writing down, what suffering is. Because if it says suffering is life, you have to know what suffering is, and then I'll go on to each truth until I find out more and more about them, until I feel like I have them. I sort of had that feeling today. I feel like I need to do it one more time. But I thought I'd do a vlog about it, do a video about it. And so, of course, I would like your comments and your feedback. I would like to know if this video helped you, if you have something you feel like you should add to the video. Check out the description of my video. I will have some links where you can go to my website and ask questions, and I would love to have like a ask questions and answering sort of thing. I'll answer your questions on here, and if you have watched this video, which has been 26 minutes long as of right now, I really appreciate you watching my video. Have a good night, Internet.